In the world of boxing, there are few moments that define a career as much as the infamous no mas fight between Roberto Duran and Sugar Ray Leonard. The fight, which took place in 1980, became one of the most talked about moments in the history of the sport. It wasn't just the physical aspect of the fight that shocked the world. It was the mental collapse of one of the most formidable fighters to ever step into the ring. That night, in the 8th round, Duran famously quit, saying, "No mas, no more," handing Leonard a victory and sending shockwaves through the boxing world. To this day, that moment remains one of the most debated in boxing history. At 73, after decades of reflection, Roberto Duran finally admits what many have speculated. No mas was the biggest mistake of his career. In his own words, Duran has come to realize that this one moment of weakness overshadowed the entire legacy he built. But behind this simple phrase lies a deeper story, a journey of regret, redemption, and ultimately, understanding the true meaning of a fighter's spirit. Before we understand why the no mas incident became such a monumental mistake, it's important to first look at who Roberto Duran was before that night. Duran was a fighter's fighter, a man who lived and breathed boxing. He came from the tough streets of Panama, and his rise to boxing superstardom was nothing short of legendary. Known for his relentless aggression, his devastating punches, and his incredible resilience, Duran quickly became one of the most feared figures in the sport. His career reached its peak when he became the world lightweight champion in 1972, defeating the great Ken Buchanan. From there, Duran's reputation continued to grow. He became known as Manos de Piedra, hands of stone, and his ferocity in the ring made him a dangerous opponent for anyone who dared to face him. Duran wasn't just a champion, he was an artist in the ring. His style was unorthodox, mixing his raw power with quick footwork and sharp instincts. He wasn't afraid to mix it up, even when the fight got dirty. His hunger for victory was unmatched, and he often made his opponents look foolish with his confidence and speed. But there was one thing that made him different from many other greats: his mental toughness. Duran believed that boxing was as much a mental game as it was physical. He was a psychological warrior, using his trash talk, confidence, and sheer force of will to break down opponents before the first punch was thrown. As Duran's career continued to soar, one challenge stood before him that would define his legacy: Sugar Ray Leonard. Leonard, the Olympic gold medalist, was everything Duran wasn't. He was quick, slick, and possessed an incredible ability to adjust to any fight. Their first encounter, the brawl in Montreal in 1980, was a brutal affair. Duran dominated the fight with his relentless pressure, power, and aggression. Leonard, though faster and more technical, was unable to match Duran's ferocity. Duran won the fight in convincing fashion, and Leonard's dream of undefeated glory was shattered. After the fight, Duran's confidence grew even bigger. He believed that he had proven himself superior to Leonard and was almost invincible. But Leonard wasn't finished. He didn't back down or fall into despair. He studied Duran, learned from the mistakes he made, and prepared for their rematch. When the two fighters met again later in 1980, things were different. Leonard had used the loss as a learning experience, and he had figured out a way to neutralize Duran's power. He was no longer just trying to outbox Duran. He was going to make the fight mentally taxing for him, push him to the limit, and force him to make mistakes. From the opening bell, it was clear that Leonard had a different game plan. He used his incredible footwork to keep Duran at bay, landing quick jabs and avoiding most of Duran's attacks. Duran, however, was frustrated. The crowd could sense that something was off. Duran, usually so calm and focused, was beginning to lose his composure. Leonard's constant movement and taunting infuriated Duran, but he couldn't get the clean shots he needed to take control of the fight. As the fight progressed, it became evident that Duran was losing his patience. His frustration began to boil over. In the 8th round, with Leonard continuing his tactics of movement, speed, and taunts, Duran, out of nowhere, stopped fighting and turned his back to Leonard. He looked at the referee and said, "No mas, no more." The arena went silent as the referee called the fight. Duran, the fierce warrior, had quit. It was a shocking moment, and the world could hardly believe it. Duran's career was forever marked by that one moment. In the days and weeks following the fight, Duran became a global symbol of failure. The boxer who had once been seen as invincible now had a blemish on his record that could never be erased. The boxing world, the fans, and the critics were all stunned. How could Roberto Duran, a man known for his iron will, quit in the middle of the fight? Duran later revealed that his decision to quit wasn't born from fear. It was born from frustration. He felt betrayed by his own body, his own abilities. Leonard's tactics were mentally draining, and Duran, at that moment, felt he had no answer. He didn't want to accept defeat, but he also didn't want to continue being humiliated. But the lasting impact of no mas wasn't just on the fans. It was on Duran himself. He admitted in interviews later on that this was his greatest regret. He realized that boxing wasn't just about physical toughness. It was about mental endurance, and Leonard had outlasted him mentally. "I made a mistake," Duran says today. "It wasn't about the fight. It was about me. I lost my focus. I let Leonard get inside my head. I let my pride get the better of me. It was a weakness I'll never forget." For many years, Duran struggled with the stigma of no mas. He was still a legendary fighter, but that moment overshadowed everything. Even when he became a world champion again later in his career, that loss haunted him. Fans would always remember Duran for his brilliance, but they would also remember the moment he quit. However, at 73, Duran has come to terms with the mistake. It took him years, but he finally understands that no fighter is perfect, and the true test of a champion is how they handle their failures. No mas wasn't just a physical moment. It was a mental breakdown, Duran reflects. "I couldn't take the pressure that night, but I learned more from that than any win in my life." Duran now sees that he wasn't just defeated in the ring, he was defeated inside his own mind. But that admission, that moment of clarity, allowed him to find peace with his past. He has spent the last few decades reminding younger fighters that even the greatest champions have moments of doubt, fear, and regret. In the next part of his story, Duran talks about how he rebuilt his mindset, learned to forgive himself, and moved forward from the greatest mistake of his career. As Roberto Duran reflects on his life and career at 73, he doesn't just see the fighter who once ruled the ring with ferocity and confidence. Instead, he sees a man who, after all the victories, titles, and knockouts, had to face his greatest battle, the battle with his own regret. The infamous no mas moment may have haunted him for years, but as he approaches his 73rd birthday, Duran now sees that it was not just a failure in the ring, but an opportunity for growth and learning. What many saw as a sign of weakness, He now understands as part of the human experience, the realization that no one is immune from failure, not even the greatest of champions. The immediate aftermath of the No Mas incident saw Duran's image tarnished. He had been the man who had dominated the lightweight division, who had defeated the best of the best with his relentless pressure and brutal style. But the moment he quit in the ring, the world saw a different side of him, one of vulnerability, one of defeat. It was a hard reality to accept for Duran, whose entire career had been built on mental toughness and confidence. For years, Duran struggled with the fact that he had quit during the most high-profile fight of his career. He had become the subject of criticism, and boxing fans who once revered him now viewed him with disappointment. The loss to Leonard was devastating, not only for Duran's career, but for his own self-image. The fire that had once burned so brightly inside him was now dimmed by the weight of that moment. However, as the years went by and Duran's reflection deepened, he began to see the No Mas incident in a different light. He no longer viewed it as the defining moment of failure. Instead, he started to view it as a lesson in humility and growth. At first, I wanted to forget it, Duran admits. I wanted to move on, but the truth is, you can't move on from something like that until you truly understand it. I had to face my mistakes. I had to accept that I wasn't perfect. One of the most profound realizations Duran had as he entered his 60s and 70s was that true redemption doesn't come from victory or reclaiming titles. It comes from forgiving yourself. For years, he was unable to forgive himself for quitting in the second Leonard fight, but as he matured, he learned that self-forgiveness was the key to peace. The hardest fight I ever had was with myself, says Duran. It was accepting my own flaws, my own weaknesses. I spent years beating myself up over that moment. But then I realized that moment wasn't the end of me. It was the beginning of something new. Duran's return to peace wasn't about seeking redemption from the public or from his critics. It was about finding it within himself. For someone who had spent his entire career building an image of invincibility, self-doubt was a foreign concept. But with age, Duran began to understand that true strength lies not in being flawless, but in accepting your flaws. In his later years, Duran became an ambassador for self-awareness and humility, particularly to the young boxers who would seek him out for advice. He taught them not just how to throw punches, but how to handle defeat and setbacks. I want young fighters to understand that you can't always win, and that's okay, says Duran. You can lose a fight, but never lose yourself. Don't let your mistakes define who you are. Let them teach you. Let them make you stronger. The rediscovery of boxing and passion. Though Duran's boxing days are long behind him, he never truly walked away from the sport. In fact, in his later years, he returned to the world of boxing as a trainer and a mentor. His involvement in boxing camps and training sessions wasn't just about sharing his technical knowledge. It was about imparting the lessons he had learned through his years in the ring. Duran's reputation as a trainer has grown in recent years as he brings his vast experience and wisdom to the younger generation. His ability to inspire fighters is now rooted not just in his record, but in his understanding of the mental side of boxing. He teaches them to never back down in the face of adversity, but more importantly, he teaches them how to accept their mistakes and move forward. In his training, Duran emphasizes mental toughness over physical prowess. He works with fighters on their mindset, helping them recognize that the true battle is often fought in the mind rather than in the ring. He wants them to understand that boxing is as much about resilience and self-awareness as it is about speed and power. Now, at 73, Duran is not the same man who once terrorized opponents with his vicious hooks and taunting jabs. The prince has been replaced by a man who has learned the value of reflection, humility, and peace. He no longer seeks glory or admiration from the public. Instead, he seeks fulfillment in the quiet moments with his family, his faith, and his role as a mentor. Duran's reflection on his career is more than just about boxing. It's about how he grew as a person, how he learned from his mistakes, and how he eventually came to forgive himself. It's about understanding that fame is fleeting, and what remains is the person you've become after all the battles, both inside and outside the ring. In his final years, Duran has learned to enjoy the simple things in life. "I've seen it all," he says, "the highs and the lows, the victories and the mistakes, and now I can just appreciate life for what it is. I'm at peace with myself, and that's something I couldn't say for a long time." A final thought: legacy and legacy beyond boxing. As Duran looks back on his legacy, he knows that his boxing achievements will never be overshadowed by one moment of weakness. "No mas was a part of my story, but it doesn't define me," says Duran. "I've done things in boxing that no one thought was possible, and that's what I want people to remember. Not the loss, but the victories, the battles that were fought and won." But beyond boxing, Duran's true legacy is in the lessons he's learned and shared with others. His story is one of resilience, humility, and redemption, a reminder that even the greatest can fall, but the true strength lies in getting back up. Duran's legacy is not just a series of triumphs in the ring, but also a legacy of self-acceptance and growth. He teaches us that every mistake is an opportunity to evolve, and no one is beyond redemption. Even at 73, Roberto Duran has found peace not through his boxing titles, but through the lessons learned from his greatest defeat. Roberto Duran's story is a powerful reminder that every champion faces moments of doubt. What do you think of his reflections on No Mas? Let us know in the comments below, and don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more inspiring boxing stories. This is Talkspire, where legends reflect, learn, and rise again.